Hi everyone, and thanks very much for joining today's session, New to You, a webinar on the environmental, economic, and social benefits of reuse. My name is Evan Newell. I'm with the Environmental Finance Center at Syracuse University, and I'll be the moderator during today's session. Just a couple of quick thank yous. This webinar is hosted by the EFC, also the Reuse Alliance and the National Recycling Coalition. And it's brought to you today thanks to a grant from the United States Department of Agriculture's Rural Development Office. We're very thankful to them for that. As a quick note, Megan Hughes from the Maryland Environmental Finance Center is not able to join us today, unfortunately, but Ms. Freed from Maryland is here. So before we get started, I just have a few quick notes. So we will move the slides ahead for you, but you may witness a brief delay as the slides are dispersed across the internet. We also welcome you to send in your questions for our panelists. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. To submit questions, you just type them into the question text box on the GoToWebinar control panel, and just send them in as you think of them. We've got a team here compiling them, and we'll ask the most relevant and prevalent questions at the end of the session. After the webinar ends, you should see a brief follow-up survey on your screen, although we have had a couple of instances where that doesn't show up, but if you do see that survey, please fill it out, as it really helps us bring you the highest quality programming in the future. Lastly, we will be recording the webinar and we'll make it available on the EFC website as soon as we can. So with those points said, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, MaryEllen Etienne. MaryEllen is the Executive Director of Reuse Alliance, a national nonprofit that works to increase public awareness of reuse and support reuse sector organizations. She's worked in the reuse sector for over 14 years at notable reuse organizations, including the New York Waste Match, NYC Materials Exchange Development Program, the London Community Resource Network, and Materials for the Arts. MaryEllen works to strengthen the reuse sector by developing a wide range of capacity building services and by providing ongoing input to the sector's growth. She's highly knowledgeable, and I mean highly knowledgeable, in reuse operations and service delivery operations. Recently consulted with the US EPA to launch the Puerto Rico Materials Exchange, and she is on the board of directors of 3 reuse organizations. So very, very qualified, and we're happy to have her. MaryEllen, if you're ready, you can take it away.
Thank you, Evan. I appreciate that glowing recommendation. I just want to welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming today to learn more about reuse. We're happy to have you here. So I just wanted to give a little context and overview of reuse in general and the Reuse Alliance before we go forward with the rest of today's program. So we'll start out with just a kind of overview of, oh, there's a little delay. I'm sorry about that. Okay. There's a lot of a delay.
Let's give this a shot. There you go.
Okay, you can forward to the next one. So, so why should we, I'm just going to flip through the beginning slides fairly quickly. So why should we care about reuse? Obviously, we know that climate change is an issue. There's dramatic shifts that are affecting our ecosystems and our economies, and so it's something that we need to take steps to deal with. Go forward. The issue of fuel, obviously depletion and soaring prices, we're all feeling that in our pocketbooks right now, whether it's transportation or home heating, it certainly is something that we are dealing with. Unemployment, it's starting to stabilize, but it's still a huge problem in the country. Oops.
Sorry,
and
MaryEllen,
you jumped ahead. That's okay. That's okay. So unemployment is starting to level off, but it's still a big issue, and you know we want to think about ways we can meet the need to employ people through green jobs. Go forward. Municipal solid waste, it's near all-time highs or at all-time highs and just increasing. There are several communities around the country that are talking about becoming zero waste, but this is just a drop in the bucket. So we really need to take wide-scale approaches to helping alleviate this problem. Okay, so how can you help? We've kind of framed the issue, obviously, the broader scope, but what can we do? And from the reuse lines, I'm going to, of course, promote the triple bottom line benefits of reuse. So reuse is really an old idea. It happens in nature, as you see with the little hermit crab. It's been happening with humans since the dawn of time. So it's something that's been around, but we're just trying to start gaining more ground and awareness around reuse. So when we talk about reuse, you know, some people kind of confuse it with recycling, and we like to differentiate the two. So I'll just give you a little background on the basics of reuse, and basically just the very simplest definition is extending the life of an item. And it doesn't matter whether you use it for the same function or a new function, it's extending the life of a manufactured item. And basically you just take it and exchange it without too much reprocessing. There could be refurbishing, but you're not crushing it as you do in recycling and making something new. You're preserving the energy, time, money, and resources that went into the manufacture of that product. And basically what is the end game? It provides high quality products to people with limited means and organizations with limited means. And it generates jobs for the business, for the community, and business activity that contributes to the economy. So I'm just going to give you a really brief overview because, again, people have maybe one set idea when it comes to reuse, and really reuse encompasses a lot of different facets. And we have it broken down into a couple different parameters. The first one is what we call conventional reuse, or as-is reuse. And the most obvious one I think everybody knows is goodwill. It's a verb now. You're goodwilling something. You know, it's just ubiquitous. But there's thrift shops, consignment stores, there's habitat restore, building materials, and architectural salvage. There's hundreds of resale and swap websites online, whether it's eBay or Freecycling. So that's a real brief overview of conventional reuse. And then we have something we call, obviously, creative reuse. There we go. And we're just, it's such a broad subsector of reuse, but we're just going to kind of hit the top three here. Creative reuse centers, and Woodward from Scrap Exchange will be talking later, but this is a little picture from Scrap in Portland, Oregon, and they have a creative kids camp in the summer. You have what we call, they call themselves trash artists. You can also call them upcyclers or repurposers, but this example is a famous artist, Leo Sewell, and his piece that's in the Children's Museum of Philadelphia, which is made from a host of discarded kids' toys. It's hard to see in this picture, but it's quite beautiful. And then, of course, you have upcyclers and designers and people that take reclaimed and salvaged materials and make everything from upcycled clothing and jewelry to furniture and home decor. So you can see the range of creative reuse is quite broad. And then we, okay, reclamation and salvage. And so what that is, I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory. You have the loosened train trestle coming out of Utah, and once it got to the point where it couldn't hold up the train, the weight of the trains anymore, it wasn't useful in that regard. It was deconstructed and made into building materials. You can see the inset. So that's something, you know, that's a real burgeoning sector, and Dave Bennink will certainly be talking more about that later. Next slide. Next slide. Okay.
It's up.
It's just slow. Okay.
Yeah.
Adaptive reuse is basically when you take a whole building or even an entire city block and you refurbish it, you bring it back to life. This is an example of Danvers State Hospital. I believe it's in Massachusetts, somewhere in New England. And it had been vacant for decades, and then they turned it into a luxury condominium complex. So that's the concept of adaptive reuse. Deconstruction is part of it. Probably before they went ahead and built this, they deconstructed all the parts they thought they might be able to use again. Another factor of reuse is refurbishing and repair. And certainly the greenest products are ones that already exist. So if you have materials that you can extend their life, you know, upgrade your computer, have somebody fix your appliances, this is certainly a very green form of consumerism. It's also obviously part of reuse.